All right, folks, I think we're going to get started. A little bit of a snafu right here at the start, but hopefully we'll get that sorted out as people come on. So the way this is going to work, we've got, if you want to ask questions, I've got the chat window open in front of me, so if you have questions, you can post it there. Know that I'm about 20 seconds ahead of you, so it may take me a minute to notice when your stuff pops up, but provided you're logged in, you should be able to ask questions. And if you don't have a YouTube account, you can email me right here, and I'll answer them as they come in. So to get started for tonight, we're going to talk about a site in Arkansas. It's a Caddo Indian site. It's called Lockesburg Mounds. And we're going to talk about some of the archaeology that we've been doing there. My name is Carl Drexler, and I'm an archaeologist for the Arkansas Archeological Survey. And just by way of orientation, if you're not terribly familiar with Arkansas archaeology or how it works, we're going to be talking a lot about the Arkansas Archeological Society and the Arkansas Archeological Survey. Now, the society is a group of people who are interested in Arkansas archaeology, but they don't necessarily work for the state. And if so, sorry, I just got a text. Having a terrible tech night here all of a sudden. Right, and the survey is a unit of the University of Arkansas system. We're sort of a state agency, and so we work together very closely. The Ouachita Chapter is hosting this broadcast is one of the chapters of the society, so they're local to Hot Springs. But to go back to the survey, we are an agency consisting of 10 stations. Sorry. 7 of which divide up Arkansas's 75 counties among them. So I am in the southwest corner of the state. I'm located down here at SAU, Southern Arkansas University, right down here in Columbia County. And so I cover the southwest corner of the state. One of the areas that I deal with is called the Little River region. It's in over here towards Sevier County. And this is where our focus has been. And just give me a second. Some people are having trouble jumping on. All right, so the Little River region lies here in southwest Arkansas, and it's the drainage for the Little River. Now, this is an area that is very poorly understood archaeologically. We don't really have a good summary for it, so the archaeological work that we've been doing in this area has really helped fill in what we know about the region. The biggest period of field work that we had was back in the 1950s and 1960s when they were building Lake Millwood, which you see here. And that was that forced the U.S. government to do some archaeological field work, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And so our research has been helping to sort of fill this in. Now, it's an important bit of new work, but actually the region's had over a century of archaeological field work there. And one of the guys that this starts off with, this is this fellow by the name of Warren K. Moorhead. He worked for the Peabody Foundation out of Andover, Massachusetts. And he came to Southwest Arkansas in January of 1915. This is about as early as you get pretty much any archaeologist out here. A couple years after a guy by the name of C.B. Moore, but Moore never made it up into Sevier County. And so Moorhead makes a trip through. He never really publishes much about what he finds, but he does make a visit to Lockesburg Mounds and makes this map of the site. He records 13 mounds with the large platform mound, Mound A, right here. It's got 11 smaller mounds noted on it. It's got a ring-shaped mound, as he called it, here, and a couple of village sites marked on the map. He also made a small collection of artifacts, surface collection, about 45 total items. They're still actually up in the Peabody Foundation collections area in Boston, basically. And it was the first description that we've got of the site. And it's really neat that we have this because this is about as early as we ever get a historical account of the place. And it's also really good to have because between Moorhead and the next time we get a professional archaeologist on site, there's a lot of damage done to the place. And this comes about in the 1930s, which this is not an isolated incident as far as looting archaeological sites goes. During the Great Depression, one of the ways that people put food on the table, frankly, was looting archaeological sites and selling to a growing network of collectors. And in 1934, there's a group of guys that had been working up at the very famous Spiro site, which is up here in eastern Oklahoma outside of Fort Smith. And they had leased a portion of the site, but not the portion that had the really opulent, fancy things in it. And so they couldn't get a lease for other areas, so instead they came down in 1934. They came down to Lockesburg, which gives you a little bit of an indication of how well thought of this site was, and that compared to something as large and grand as Lockesburg Mounds, or as Spiro Mounds, Lockesburg was sort of their runner-up. I mean, this was known amongst collectors, as being a fairly significant place. We're not entirely sure about how many of the mounds they got into, how extensive the damage was, because they simply just didn't keep notes. We hear from a few scattered accounts that they got into the big platform mound called Mound A, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But for as long as they were out there, we have no real idea of how widely they were digging. Now, after the Depression tapers off, unless I got some more questions. All right, and looks like we got Tommy made it in, so we got some other folks. So welcome everyone. All right, so jumping back into the story. We get done with the Great Depression. World War II comes and goes, and the next real clear account we have of anything going on at the site comes in 1968, when a guy who lived in DeQueen, a guy by the name of Ernest Seibert, was a very active avocational archaeologist, talked my predecessor Frank Schambach into coming out and looking at the site. Frank had just come to Southwest Arkansas. He was just opened this research station, so this was one of the first places he visited. He noted, that it was a neat site, but he said it's in no danger of destruction at the present time. And he and Seibert, well, mostly Seibert, put together this map showing 10 mounds. And Frank, he had a bunch of other research going on at a bunch of other places, and so he never made it back to Lockesburg Mounds to do any digging. And it would stay pretty much in this condition, as far as we know, for about 12 years. One of our former staff members, David Kelly, visited the site in 1978 and reported that the mounds appeared to be in, quote, good condition, unquote. So that they were protected by a forest, and this was keeping them safe. So I'm obviously leading up to the antithesis here. So after 1978, things take a turn. In 1980, another one of our staff members, a guy by the name of John Miller, goes out to the site and finds that some local relic hunters had signed out an indefinite mining lease from the landowner, on the condition that they wouldn't interfere with livestock. They could go out and dig whatever they wanted to. The pots were to be sold as a commodity, and that mining lease practice is something that we see, harkening back to the 1930s. Those guys who had been up in Spiro and then come down to Lockesburg, that was, they signed out mining leases in that same sort of fashion. This is the same kind of mining lease you would use to get like mineral rights or oil, natural gas, that kind of thing. It's just as for Native American pottery. So this was not run-of-the-mill looting. And it was a very jealously guarded lease for several years. And we have a few scattered accounts of what was going on out there. Very little, actual proper documentation of it, because again, this is not how relic hunters tend to work. But we do have the benefit of a guy by the name of Don Wyckoff, who worked for the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey, visited the site in 1985, and at the time, you can only take photographs from the road, because the road was a county road that anyone could have access to. And if you weren't a leaseholder, the diggers were made sure that you did not come on that land. Occasionally, we hear that there were actually armed guards posted to defend the diggings. So this was a very contentious thing. And we don't have any collections that archaeologists actually made at the site. We don't have anything firmly attributed to the site from this period, and that's a real detriment to our understanding of how what the site contained. And we're also sort of working in the shadow of what has been done to the site. And John Miller, when he visited the site in 1980, he said he shook all the way back to Magnolia, because this was basically industrialized looting. If you saw on the previous slides, they literally were taking a backhoe to the mounds, just carving into them, trying to find pots. And their real goal was to try to find Native American graves, because they are associated finding graves with finding pots, and so they were looking for those. And so after they tore into apparently every visible mound on site, may actually have also just started cutting trenches across the fields looking for cemeteries. It was really, really extensive. One of the few pieces of documentation showing how extensive it was this map made again by Don Wyckoff. Very thankful for his visit and his note-taking. And it shows a schematic map of the mounds. Mound A, the big platform mound right here in the center. You can actually see his notations for where he saw trenches cut. And this was pretty extensive stuff. And he summed it up by saying that he thought that Lockesburg Mound Group is a page of the past that's been ripped in two. Maybe by now both pieces have even been shredded. So he's kind of dour about our prospects for getting more information back out of this site. And so this is what we're working in the wake of. And our new research at Lockesburg Mounds has been attempting to reconstruct a bit of what's been done to it over the past century, what's out there that's been attributed to it, and then to go out and actually collect our own new data. And so this starts off with basically in the lab. We don't actually have to go to the site at first. One of the first pieces of research that we've done employed this technique called Lidar Analysis. It's called light detection and ranging, which basically is a technique where you take an airplane or a helicopter with a really fancy laser array mounted underneath it, and you fly it over the landscape, and it bombards the ground with millions and millions and millions of pulses of laser light, which are reflected and then recorded back at the aircraft. And so this tells you, based on the travel time, gives you a very fine-grained topographic map of the landscape, which at the very least you can do to create some really high-resolution 3D images. The one you see here, this is the Arkansas Capitol building in Little Rock. Real snazzy. And then if you one of the really nice things about LiDAR is it actually lets you digitally remove trees from the landscape. And it does this by, you can, within every pulse, some number of shots are going to go through all the leaves and then be bounced back up to the airplane. And so those last return data, they call it, are the ones that have hit off the ground surface and been reflected back. And so if you take the data set and look only at the longest travel time points, you can actually digitally remove the forest in the computer, which is what we did with Lockesburg Mounds. So this is what was called a bare earth LiDAR model of the landscape, which when we stick lines around the mounds, you can see we pop out, we've got at least 10 mounds very clearly displayed in the landscape. There's a midden area off to the east that's been noted in some field records. And obviously, the center of the site is this Mound A, the big platform mound, right in the center. So, right away, we've got the most complete and most accurate map of the site. Didn't have this before, so that's a plus. And it gives us a really interesting look at how the mounds are arranged in relation to one another. These are clearly set up to create a very specific take on the landscape, and so this is a very easy way to develop this first kind of understanding of the site. Now, after that, we went out with a piece of equipment called a Grady Ometer, and basically what it does is it maps very tiny fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. This is the machine, and it's got two sensors on it, so it goes twice as fast. And basically what this is the big brother to like a metal detector, and just instead of making beeps, it records everything as essentially a digital image viewed from above, but looking at magnetic data instead of light. And so when I'm using this, I can't wear my glasses, which are made of titanium, which is non-magnetic, so they won't mess with the machine, but the little tiny screws right here are magnetic, and those are enough that they will completely throw the machine off. So it's a very, very sensitive piece of equipment. But the cool thing about it is if you take it out and then lay out a grid across the site and walk this machine back and forth across that grid, you get essentially a very fine-grained look at the buried magnetic characteristics of the site, which is really helpful if you're looking at, say, historic sites that have a bunch of nails on them, because those nails will show up as sort of big scatters. They'll tell you that you have a house. But with pre-contact sites, you'll also see things from where dirt's been turned over, and the iron particles in the soil reorient a little bit. Also places where you've had haars and fire pits and that kind of thing will actually show up. And so we use this out at Lockesburg. So this is again our site overview. And we started by laying out a bunch of grids over here in the sort of flat open space in front of Mound A, which if you look really closely, this mound right here is recorded as Mound I with a question mark next to it. And that's because there's not a really good 3D representation of a mound there. But when you looked at the layout, you had mound, and a mound here, and it seemed like just there should be one in there. And so when we started the geophysical data collection, the magnetometry, we got this very clear circular footprint right where I thought that Mound I should be. And so what we think we have here essentially is a mound that was probably fairly heavily disturbed by relic hunters and then plowed flat. But we know that there's something there. That's something we can explore in future. And when we put those together, you see it matches in really, really well. So we started off with the Lidar. We came in with the Grady Ometer, and we also started looking around to see if there were any artifacts out there that are attributed to Lockesburg that would give us an idea of what kind of stuff other people had found there. And this is talking to relic hunters, talking to colleagues, just anything we can find to help start filling in this picture. So there are what we found out was that in the 1980s, after the major relic hunting out at the site, there were a handful of materials donated to the University of Arkansas Museum that were attributed to the site. Now, this is one of the things about relic hunting versus archaeology, is that we document all the context as thoroughly as we can. So if it's in my artifact collections, I can definitively say this came from this site. What I'm going to show you are things that people have told me come from this site, but I don't have the documentation to know that completely for sure. But with that caveat, I'll show you some of the things that have been connected to Lockesburg Mounds. So one of the first things that's been pushed out there is this image, which was went out in the Central States Archaeological Journal in 2008. It is one of the things recovered from the site in 1934, and those relic hunters that came down from Spiro, they brought up apparently a cache of 8 Flint Blades that were purchased by a teenager by the name of Robert Bell, who would later go on to become a professional archaeologist in Oklahoma. This was apparently one of the things he bought early on, as he was getting really excited about archaeology. And this blade is about 9 inches long, 3 inches wide, and only 3/32 of an inch thick. I want to point out this is the profile view going down the middle of it. And it's absolutely incredible flint knapping work. If you've ever tried doing that, this is really, really difficult to do. Most of the other blades in that cache were recently on the market. I grabbed this image of them. The blade I just showed you is this one right here. So the other ones are just as big, if not bigger. These are absolutely amazing pieces of art, and again attributed to the site. So we knew that the University of Arkansas Museum had these, and we also found out that there was some pottery associated with the site, some of which had documentation on it suggesting it came from burials. And so before we went to go look at that, and as we were sort of building our research program around Lockesburg, said, okay, well, now this is a time, before we go looking at the burial materials, we need to talk to the descendant group. So we got in contact with the Caddo Nation in Oklahoma, headquartered in Binger. I went over there and we had some initial chats. They then came to our home office in Fayetteville, and we discussed the project a little more thoroughly, talked about the kinds of things that they would like to do to be both part of the research and also some things for sensitive handling of certain materials. And they've been an ongoing partner with us, and we're really thankful for that. And with those details ironed out, they gave us permission to go and look at the pottery that had been recovered from the site and then later donated. And the U of A museum has a couple dozen pottery vessels attributed to the site. Some really beautiful ones. And then through subsequent conversations and research, we also found out that there was, in the U of A museum collection, this item, which has been identified either as a cat serpent effigy or a dog effigy, from a burned wooden bowl. And we really don't see that many wooden vessels from Caddo sites, so this is a real rarity. It's very neat to see this. There's a lot of research we need to do here in terms of sort of looking at the art style, at the frequency of finding wooden bowls and this kind of thing. That's a whole other thing that's still ahead of us. but this is a thing that's been attributed to the site. So all of that, set the background for last year's Arkansas Archaeological Society summer training program. And so this is sort of the meat of the thing that we're here to talk about tonight. And if you're new to Arkansas or new to Arkansas Archaeology, the Society's summer training program is a really fascinating and fun experience. This is the time when people who have an interest in Arkansas archaeology, but don't do it full time, or like to do it on their spare time, as well as as for a profession, because we have a lot of professionals that are part of the society. They all come together in June and put dozens of people on a site to both advance pieces of research, but then also to train people how to do archaeology the right way. It's a great program. I'd say we do this every year, but with the pandemic, we had to at least postpone this year's program. But last summer, we had 75 people participate in this over 2.5 weeks. So, it was just absolutely a wonderful experience. And we're based out of Ouachita in DeQueen. We had our lab there. We do some evening talks during it. We're extraordinarily thankful to all the people at the campus who were just great hosts, great to work with. I hope to go back soon when all this whole thing is cleared up. And basically what we do is we gather at Ouachita bright and early every morning and hop in a very long line of pickup trucks, and I'm sure confuse the heck out of the locals. And we'd take a dig crew down to the site. And so there are two areas that we're going to talk about with this. One, so our main dig area was here at Mound A, and then we also have some excavations going on at Mound E over here. But I'm going to start with Mound A, and to come back to the severity of the looting that was done here in the 1980s. I want to point out something really, really important about the LiDAR data that I've been showing you. So if you look here on the top of this was, had been basically a rectangular platform. But you see it's got these sort of weird blips and dips in it. These are actually 1980s looter holes that are left unopened, and you can still actually see and walk in. And they're so deep and so severe that they actually get picked up in the LiDAR data. You can actually literally see the stuff from the air. It's really heavily damaged. But this was, a lot of our goal this past summer was to document the site itself and learn about the archaeological record there, but then also to document the effects of the relic hunting that took place. And so with Mound A, we decided, okay, we want to start looking for the stratigraphy within the mound. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick pick one of these looter cuts, and we'll just cut a profile in it, and that'll start giving us a mound construction sequence going down. And so what we wound up doing is picking up this little dent in the back of it. This is a backhoe cut, and when seen at the start of the dig, this is what it looked like. This is the cut itself right here, and we start off just doing a lot of bushwhacking, pulling back the vegetation to clear out an area where we could start digging. And so this was a really complex dig. We had a series of 2 by 2 meter excavation units coming down the face of the mound. You can see this is all the mound here. As you can see, it's very, very tall. It's a absolutely huge piece of earthwork, and we started off, just simply, digging our excavation levels only in the sort of uphill corners of it, and which made us feel like we're moving real fast because, we work, going down, at 10 to 20 centimeters at a time, which when you're on this many sort of complex angles, this is one of our topmost units, and this is the 0 to 20 excavation level is only this corner of it. And so over the course of the 2 weeks, we start pulling the dirt out in these very controlled levels, and all of that dirt would be brought down to the base of the mound where it was screened for artifacts. And I put this photograph in here for a couple of reasons. One, to proudly put out that we had one of several Southern Arkansas University mule riders participating. The girl in the front is one of our history majors. But one of the great things about the training program is that we get a lot of students from some of the smaller universities in Arkansas that maybe don't have like a field school, but want to get some field experience. They come out and participate. Some people take it for credit. Some people just for the learning opportunity. And so we had students from UALR, Henderson State, SAU, and a couple. My brain just. William Miguel, I'm sorry. In Batesville. I'm sorry, guys. My brain just broke on that one. But they come from all over the state to learn to do this, and so this was great. Great experience for them. This is their first time getting to swing a shovel. Okay. Over the course of those 2 weeks out at Mound A, those excavation units start getting deeper and deeper, and they start getting continuous walls connecting them. And by the end of the training program, we had a solid face coming down this side of the profile. Now, this was the real goal of the excavation here, was to get this stratigraphic sequence exposed, and at the same time we got this edge coming down. Oh, Lyon College. Thank you, Mary Beth. My brain, it just was not coming to me. All right, and so this face will give us the undisturbed profiles within the mound. This face over here gets us the disturbed ones. So we got that exposed. That was what I wanted to do in this area. And then once we had all that exposed, we had one of the greatest profile drawing parties you will ever see in Arkansas archaeology, where we had this huge collection of profiles being drawn all in unison. And of course, we photograph them and then draw them to where you get all the soil patches recorded in them. And one of the things we're moving to now that the semester's over is we've got these all knit together to where you can see the entire profile of the mound coming down here, and gives us a whole complete look at the strata. So this face, the one I just showed you, shows us the undisturbed portion of the mound, coming down in front of Mr. Porter here. We also were very interested in documenting the destruction as well, which, when you look at the other profile, this is where, clear me off of here. You can see that both in the profile drawings, but we could actually see it in the field. And what you see here, so this light colored dirt is actually material from one of the upper construction layers in the mound that the backhoe pulled out and then smeared down slope. And you can actually see the lens of displaced mound fill coming here and then up. And this was just basically a big swipe of dirt coming down here. So we got the damage documented along with the intact portion. So we got both of the things that we really wanted out of this area. And one of the things that, as we started getting about midway through week 2, started hitting home, is that we had spent a week and a half pulling dirt down off the top of the mound and screening it for artifacts. And so, okay, we are going to have to put it back up before we go. So we started, luckily with the society, we have a bunch of folks who are more engineering inclined than I am, and devised a very genius system of pulleys and wheelbarrows to put the dirt back up the hill. And so we built this really nice set of ramps, and over the course of only like 2 days, we were able to backfill the site and basically leave it like we found it, which was great. Sure as heck beats backfilling, just carrying bucket loads up and down the hill. That would have not been as easy by any stretch. So, for this area, we got a lot of good information, mostly focusing on the stratigraphy. What we didn't get a lot of, frankly, were artifacts. And our lab manager, Fiona Taylor, who used to work for us, is now in grad school in Scotland, was getting a little, was joking a little bit about the small number of things that were coming out of this, which I'm not terribly surprised by, because this is not a habitation site. This was something that was deliberately built in stages, and so this was something that you would be a lot of fill dirt, but not a lot of artifacts coming out of it. But there were some things that came out. One of the first couple items that came out were a bunch of 19th century bricks and nails and that kind of thing, which not at all surprised by. Early American farmers, when they came out to Arkansas, almost always like to get land in river valleys, which flooded a lot. And so if you're gonna have your house somewhere near your farmland, and you want to stay dry, you put it up on as high a land as you can get close to where your fields are. And if you have a really big Native American mound right adjacent to your fields, you build your house in it, and it keeps you and your family safe. If you go over to the Arkansas Delta, you'll find houses built on Native American mounds all over the place. It's happening here too. So I wasn't terribly surprised by that. I was kind of surprised by one of the first pre-contact artifacts that came out, being an archaic, like early to middle archaic, I believe this is commonly referred to as a Cache River point, which is literally thousands of years older than I was really expecting for for our projectile points on the site to be. But actually, this was a beneficial find. What I think this is that this just tells us that there was a much earlier occupation on the site going back into the Archaic period, and that this was probably somewhere in this area over here, which I think is a borrow pit that they used to build Mound A, and that this got pulled up with that material to build the mound and gets deposited in the mound itself. And wouldn't have found it without it being included. So it's a fortuitous find, but it gives us a much deeper understanding of occupation in the area. Perhaps the most odd and momentarily awkward find of the dig, though, came from right at the edge of the relic hunter's pit. We started exposing the handle of a tool, and we were saying, okay, well, one of the looters, dropped a pair of root clippers. And as we uncovered a little more, started finding that, it's got orange tape on it, which within the survey, we mark all of our field equipment as with different colors of tape. So you have different colored tape will tell you, whose station owns what stuff. All my stuff has got yellow on it. The Arkansas State University station has red on it. And the orange tape is for the Henderson State University station. And so, as we uncovered a little more, it's got orange tape on it, and we started joking, it's one of HSU's set of clippers, which back when this cut would have been fresh, this would have been Dr. Ann Early's station. So we were joking, just, sneaking around checking out the cuts, But then once we had it documented, Tim Mulvihill from UA Fort Smith reached down, pulled it out, and said, it's one of ours. I said, Tim, that's not very funny. And he said, no, seriously, it's one of ours. Because it actually had AAS HSU written on it. And this led to an awkward moment, trying to figure out how we would explain having a pair of Dr. Early's clippers on site. I called our director, George Sabo, and said, this is what we got. What does this mean? And he said, actually, no, this is a really good thing, because what we believe this is in 1986, the training program was being held at a place called Holman Springs, which is nearby. And during that training program, Dr. Dan Wolfman, who was our Arkansas Tech station archaeologist at the time, went out to Lockesburg Mounds and collected what's called an archaeomagnetic dating sample. Which, if you're new to archaeomagnetic dating, basically, the Earth's magnetic north that everybody in this compass aligns to moves. And so where it moves, as it moves, we have a fairly good history of that progression. And if you heat Earth to the point, it's called the Curie point, is basically hot enough that the iron particles in the dirt can reorient. They will reorient to magnetic north, and then when the Earth cools, it'll be those iron particles will lock in that orientation. So if you have like a fire pit, this tells you, okay, this is the alignment. And you can, if you very carefully collect some soil samples aligned to current magnetic north, you can sort of figure out when those, the dating difference. And Dr. Wolfman had collected some samples. They haven't been processed, but he just sort of generally recorded them as being from a well-baked floor somewhere on Mound A. And finding the clippers here, what we think happened was he borrowed a set of Dr. Early's clippers. He apparently had a bit of a reputation for commandeering other people's equipment, and collected that sample somewhere in the near vicinity of where we were digging. So this is, when we go out and do more excavations out there, this now tells us, okay, well, this is something we need to be on the lookout for. We may actually be able to find where he collected his sample cubes from, because it would be nice hard baked earth. So great hope there. Now I mentioned that we had Mound A was one area. We're also have some work ongoing at Mound E out here. This is where we have our basic excavation class set up, and it's run by Dr. Emily Beam, who both oversaw excavations at the area and taught the class, ably assisted by Gary Knudsen from the Society, and this is Gary here, and Sarah Stuckey from our Jonesboro office assisted with that as well. And this is where people, if you've never done any kind of archaeology before, when you come out to dig with us, you start in basic excavation. And this was, I didn't necessarily want to put a bunch of people on the side of a mound, so this was a little safer area for people to learn on. And it was an area that we had done some more geophysics on, and we knew that there was something here to be explored. And over the course of those 2 weeks, those excavators uncovered basically the set of 6 2x2 meter test units, which had a bunch of really kind of fascinating areas within them that we documented at the end of the training program with a drone flight. Where one of our volunteers had a family member with access to a drone, and so we, Dr. Zabecki, shown here, and I believe Willie Ibanez from Lyon College is this hat at the side of the picture. They together flew the drone and took this really nice overhead photo of the excavation site. And what we see here is you've got basically the center of a Caddo house. This is the burned kind of central hearth area here. And then there's some other areas going on, but then we've got coming through here, these are backhoe slices. This is from the backhoe bucket coming through in the 1980s. And so we've got, again, both intact material and disturbed area documented. And so, this is where we're achieving our goals at both Mound A and Mound E by getting some idea of what's going on at the site, and also then what has been done to the site and the extent of the damage. Now, over the next year, hopefully the next time we do a training program out here, we're going to be expanding our excavations at Mound E to catch the edges of this house. We've got the center. Now we want to go out and get the edges of it, characterize it a little more, do some more excavations on Mound A as well. And we also have some samples to process from Mound E. We got support from the Society to get a radiocarbon date on a timber from Mound E process. So there are a lot of directions we were going to be able to go with this, and I called this the First Excavations because these are literally the first few small bits of actual earth being moved in a potentially much larger, longer project, which I hope we'll be coming back to in the field soon. But we're working at the along in the wake of COVID and all that, so we're just have to see. So I want to close by acknowledging some people who are really helpful to this process. Of course, the 75 people who were part of the training program absolutely could not have gotten this far without them. But particularly Greg and Larry Hale from Lockesburg and Little Rock, the landowners, very graciously gave us permission to be out there. Chairman Tamara Francis and her staff members Derek Hill and David Chamberlain from the Caddo Nation in Oklahoma were both active in the consultation process early on, and then been working with us since. We've been very grateful for their collegiality. And then folks from the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey and the University of Arkansas Museum, and many other people who've been part of this research. So, right. So that's sort of where we are with Lockesburg Mounds coming off the training program. I hope we'll be getting back out there soon, but we just have to see how our current situation plays out. But I'm very grateful for everything that people have contributed to this point, and yeah. So I guess I'm going to wind it up there. If you have questions about the research or want to get involved, you can either join the society, or you can contact me at this email address, this phone number, and I'll tell you what I know. So, all right. Thanks for coming, everybody, and see you around.